Today we're talking about what happened to every single player that either played or was a substitute for every single roster during the Modern Warfare CDL season. Alright, we're going to start off strong with everybody's favorite Chicago Huntsman, now turned into Optic Texas. So starting off, we have Scumpy. He's not going everywhere. Everybody knows where he is. He's still with Optic Texas. Moving on, we have Formal. Formal did end up retiring from Call of Duty, and Formal now plays for the Optic Halo team in the HCS. Moving on to Arcides. Arcides moved over to Atlanta Faze, and he's been going strong on Faze ever since. Villain Envoy, now a player for the Los Angeles Thieves. And then we have Pristini, who is now the substitute for the Atlanta Faze, and he just started recently playing in the Challenger scene and going hard in the Challenger scene. Up next, we have Jordan General, who was a substitute for the Huntsman at the time. He is still currently the substitute for Optic today, and again, going hard in the Challenger scene, waiting for his chance. Next up, we have Gunless, who was a substitute for the Huntsman and actually played for the Huntsman at one point. He is now on the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and currently he's not playing because of some issues, but he currently resides with the Los Angeles Guerrillas. And then we have Embos, which I'm not sure if you guys know this or not, but Embos was actually a substitute on the roster for the Huntsman. Embos is just doing his thing, man. Just content. That's it. Embos, nobody knows where he's at. He's doing Rich and Lonely stuff. He's doing Optic podcasts. That's all we know. Next up, we have the Dallas Empire, which just recently merged with Optic, and NB and Optic have merged, and now they're Optic Texas. Starting off with Clayster. Clayster went to the New York Subliners and has recently got benched. He's not retired yet. I think he's looking to get back into league. He still does want to play, but for right now, he is not on a roster. Next up, we have Illy, who has moved over to Optic Texas, and he is now the IGL for the boys. And just like Illy, we have Shotzi, who's over with Optic Texas, the Movement King, going strong on Optic. Then we have Crim6, just won the Pro-Am Classic under the New York Subliners. And lastly, we have Hook from the Dallas Empire, who is now playing for LAG and has just won the Minnesota Major. Moving on to Optic Gaming Los Angeles. Starting off with Kenny, he currently resides on the Los Angeles Thieves. And then we have Slasher, who currently plays for the Los Angeles Guerrillas. TJ Haley, who plays for the newest CDL team, the Boston Breach. Dashy, who plays for Optic Texas. And JCap, who is now the coach for the LA Thieves. Now, during the Modern Warfare season, Draza and Hollow, two new players to the CDL, were introduced into the lineup for Optic Gaming Los Angeles. Draza now is currently a starter and plays for the Los Angeles Thieves, and Hollow is still grinding through the Challengers scene. Next up, we have Chino, who was a substitute for Optic Gaming Los Angeles. He is now making content for the Los Angeles Guerrillas. And to finish off Optic Gaming Los Angeles, we have Goonjar, who is streaming and going hard in Valorant. But real quick, I know it took me a while to get this video out, but I did put a lot of effort and research into this video, so it would mean a lot if you guys dropped a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, and maybe share it with your friends. But the next team up is going to be one of the 3 teams that actually aren't in the US. And of course, we're talking about Paris Legion. First up, we have Røkkr. Røkkr is still currently competing in COD and dominating in the Challengers APAC scene, and hopefully he gets another chance at the league soon. Moving on to Shox. Shox also still competes in the Challenger scene of Call of Duty. Up next, we have Denz and Zed, who are both currently coaches, actually, for the Boston Breach. Moving on to Kismet. Kismet was tearing up the Challenger scene this year and actually earned a spot on the roster of the New York Subliners. And now Brezzy, who is currently one of the top Challengers players, and unfortunately, he was one of the players from Texas Nation that didn't get a starting spot. So he's still dominating the Challenger scene. He actually just recently found a new team. Lastly, from the starting roster, we have Phantoms. Phantoms is also currently on one of the top Challengers teams, placing 3rd at the most recent cup. Minnesota Røkkr is up next to bat, starting strong with none other than Assault. Assault has been a menace in the Challenger scene these last few years alongside Exceed, and is one of the players that really deserves a starting spot in the league. Up next is the Giant, GodRx. That man is very, very tall. GodRx is doing his thing in Challengers, and he's currently under Electrify Steel. On to Silly, and you can start to see a common theme here. A lot of these players are in Challengers and are still competing in the Challenger scene, including Silly. And he's been putting up consistently top 16 placements, so he's doing really good. Moving on to Alex. This is a bit of a different one because Alex hasn't posted on social media in almost a year now, so I have no clue what Alex is up to, but I wish him the best. So if you guys know what Alex has been up to, or if you know where he's been, let me know in the comments down below. And finally, the core 5 will be complete with Asem. Asem is now one of the top players in the CDL, playing under the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and just recently won Major 2. Now, Røkkr did bring on 2 substitutes to the roster, one being Assault's duo Exceed, who's still grinding with him in the Challengers scene today, and Tiny, who is also in Challengers. And now Tiny is one of the players that I actually really respect, because instead of Tiny going out there and taking well-known players, good players to compete in Challengers, he actually finds good players that aren't really well-known, that don't have their name out there, and he builds his roster around those players and gets their name out there. So shout out to Tiny. And now for the second out of the 3rd team in the CDL that is not from the United States, and that's going to be Toronto Ultra, who actually signed 10 people to their roster at the beginning of the Modern Warfare season. And starting that list off strong, we have Looney. who is currently one of the coaches for one of the previous teams I mentioned, the Minnesota Røkkr. Moving on to Methods, who has actually built an insanely incredible brand for himself over the years and got picked up as a starter for the Boston Breach. Moving on to Brack. Brack is currently competing in Challengers and just placed second in the last cup, so it's safe to say he's doing his thing, but definitely deserves a spot in the league. On to Lucky and Metals, who are still teaming together in the EU Challengers scene and just won the most recent cup, actually. And now Kleenex, who is one of the starters from the Modern Warfare season, who is actually still currently a starter alongside his teammates Bant, who has actually been one of my favorite players since Black Ops 4, and Cammy, who has also been going crazy in the league. So those three are still a core three and are actually still under the Toronto Ultra. Next up, we have Mayhem. Mayhem has stayed with the Toronto Ultra and coaches their academy team. And finally, completing the 10-man roster, we have Nikki D Classic, none other than Classic. Classic is actually playing in the Challenger scene and was recently brought up as a sub for the Seattle Surge. Hope you guys are enjoying this video, and I appreciate the follow and the support from all of you guys and all the comments that you guys leave me. But real quick, if you guys aren't following my Twitter or my Twitch, go down below and check both of those out. My Twitter, I post updates on some YouTube videos, what YouTube videos I'm making, some sneak peeks sometimes, and you guys can just get an insight on when I'm going to post the videos, and basically everything YouTube. Also, make sure you guys go check out my Twitch, twitch.tv/gswizzing. On there, I've been streaming some Valorant. So if you guys just like me as a person, if you like the vibe, you like the personality, or if you just like other games besides Call of Duty, make sure you guys go check that out in the description. Next up, we have the Deep Sea team, the Florida Mutineers. Now, starting off with the Florida Mutineers is actually my current favorite player, which is going to be Colt Havoc. Havoc has been dominating the Challenger scene this year, placing first in almost every single Challengers Cup. He's gotten first place more than he's gotten second to last, which is crazy. But Havoc actually finally got his well-deserved and earned spot on the Minnesota Røkkr, so now he has a starting spot over there. Up next, we have Neptune, who is actually playing for the New York Subliners, but has recently got benched, and now he's grinding through the Challenger scene. On to Slacked, who's currently doing some work for the CDL, as well as producing content, looking to get on an org. And then this next one is actually a really sad one, because this next one is Pharaoh. Pharaoh actually unfortunately passed away, but he was actually an amazing player, and he's always going to be remembered, so rest in peace to Pharaoh. On to Mox. Mox currently competes in the amateur Halo scene, and I actually see him going hard and posting for scrims like every day on Twitter, so shout out to Mox. Hopefully he keeps grinding and keeps pursuing Halo, or comes back to COD, who knows. Next up, we actually have another player that's also competing in Halo right now, which is going to be Frost. Frosty plays for the Sentinel Halo roster. Maniac is actually up next, and if you didn't know, he was actually listed as a substitute for the Florida Mutineers, but he never actually played. I don't think he played Modern Warfare at all, like not even practice, like literally nothing. But now Maniac's back on Optic, and he's still producing content with the boys. And finally, to round out the Florida Mutineers, we have Persini, who was actually on the Mutineers before he moved over to the Huntsman, so we already covered him. And now the final team that's not from the United States is going to be the London Royal Ravens. The Royal Ravens actually had the first player signing in all of the CDL, and that being Wuskins. Wuskins is currently pursuing content and streams and plays a lot of Valorant. Wuskins was also joined by his brother Scraps on the Royal Ravens, and Scraps is also currently doing content, and he streams a lot of Warzone. Next up, we have Dylan. Dylan is now the head coach of the Paris Legion, and the first non-British player to join the team of the Royal Ravens was Jerd. And Jerd has actually not been active lately, so I'm not sure what he's been up to. But if anybody does know, again, let me know down in the comments. Rated is next. Rated is currently a professional Warzone player and content creator for 100 Thieves. And then Nasty actually joined later on in the year, but was unable to play for long due to him not being able to stay in the US. So he was moved to the bench, but now he has a well-deserved spot as a starter on the London Royal Ravens. Zero then joined the team as he was a bench player for New York Subliners, actually, and he stayed on the team to this day, so he's still the main AR for the London Royal Ravens. Up next, we have the biggest gaming organization to date, Faze Clan, who owns the Atlanta Faze. Faze has always had a core 3 players to their lineup, which are still playing with them as of right now. And those players are the Tiny Terrors, Simp and Abizi, and Celium. 3 very talented players who haven't left, and I don't see them going anywhere in the near future. Next up on Faze, we have Major Maniac. Major actually just recently got dropped from Minnesota Røkkr, and he's been competing in Challengers. Priesta from Colorado, shout out Priesta, was the last player of the 5-man roster and now resides in the Minnesota Røkkr. Atlanta Faze went on to pick up 2 substitutes in Journey and Gravity. Journey now plays in the EU Challenger scene under AIM Esports, and Gravity has actually gotten his spot, which he deserved and has been grinding for a very long time on the Paris Legion roster. Moving on to the Los Angeles Guerrillas, starting off with one of the best COD players to exist, and that is Aches. Aches currently is the co-host of The Flink and is doing some work in game design. Next up, we have Yuli Aqua, who's also like most players and is competing in the Challenger scene. Then we have Decimate, who I don't believe competes in Challengers, but actually he just plays chows in tournaments, so you can go check out his stream. Next up, we have Saints, who is now the coach for the Minnesota Røkkr. Lacefield, which also Lacefield really doesn't post that much. It looks like he does stream Warzone every now and then, but he doesn't compete. Los Angeles Guerrillas had 2 substitutes, those being Ricky and Blast. Ricky is currently the coach of the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and Blast is actually now a pro Warzone player for the Minnesota Røkkr. Spart was also on the roster and is competing in the Challengers, and currently a substitute player, and actually got his chance to step in and actually win Major 2 for the Los Angeles Guerrillas. And last but not least, we have the New York Subliners. Starting very strong, we have the Stallion himself, Zuma, who runs the best esports podcast, which is The Flank, and has become a very successful brand and a streamer in the gaming scene. Next up, we have Donnie Temp, who's a player for the Paris Legion. And then on to the Iceman, Accuracy, who plays under the Seattle Surge. And Zero, who we talked about earlier, actually was on the starting roster for the New York Subliners, but we talked about him earlier. Attach was also a part of the starting roster for the New York Subliners, and now plays as a starter on the Røkkr. And Sensor actually joined as the first substitute for the New York Subliners, and has been grinding the Challenger scene since then, and recently actually got picked up by the Boston Breach for the content team. The second starter ended up being Happy, and Happy now streams and does content. And later on in the year, New York Subliners actually picked up Mac, and Mac now has a starting spot on the Seattle Surge with his flu game. That's going to be it for this video, but let me know if you guys do want to see a similar video to this, something with the new players of the CDL and how they came up in the scene. If you guys want to see that video, let me know. And if you guys did like this video, make sure you drop a like and check out this video up next. Stay classy.